Hi there, Sam Rad here, and I'm so excited to speak to you today about blockchain, decentralization, and more broadly, the shifts that are impacting us in society, in all areas of society, but more importantly, how we exchange, how we live our lives, both in real and virtual environments. And so, before I get started, I'd like to start with a story of a time that I've experienced in my own lifetime over the past decade, exponential change. So, when I was 16 years old, I had the opportunity to move abroad on my own to a place I had never been to and find my way to study at a school. And of course, my parents dropped me off at the airport. I fly across the world, I land there. And what do I use to find my way from place to place to travel from A to B is a map and a public transport system, right? And so let's fast forward 10 years to when I had another experience. I moved to San Francisco to start my third company, and I had never been there. I literally showed up with my bags and had to go straight to a meeting. And so, how did I get there? Was it a map? No, I used Uber. So I just entered the location, got from point A to point B, and I never needed to know what happened in between. And actually took me quite some time to know where I was in this city. And so the question is, what's happened, between this map and that app? So let's go back to the mid 90s when companies like MapQuest, I'm sure you remember this one with your crumpled directions sitting in your car if you drove a car then. Um, were they working to create simply a better map, a better way to get from point A to point B? Kind of, but let's look at a company that we all well know today, Google. And so when Google was approaching the concept of a map, they weren't thinking about it as simply a map or a way to see directions or to get from point A to point B. They are actually looking at it in respect to location data. And so they did something very different with that, and they opened the access to this data for others to build on top of it. And at the time, people thought that they were crazy. This was a completely different approach to building businesses, and it was something that they certainly would not be able to maintain competitive status on. And so, what did we see after they did that? We saw the rise of ride sharing. We saw the on-demand food economy. We saw Airbnb and home rentals. We saw Yelp and location-based reviews. We even saw location-based dating apps. And so, in short, the entirety of this decade or longer's economic driving forces has been, the shift from this map to this app. And what was it? Was it a shift in technology or no? Really, it was a broader evolution in thought. And that's what decentralizing technologies like blockchains and cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens, which enable things like decentralized finance, they really represent something more broad than a shift in technology, an exponential shift in technology. They represent an evolution in thought. And so today, we'll quickly look at where we were, what our social operating system was of the past. We'll move into where we are in the present, or where we think we are in the present, where we're going in the future. And to start, let's look at the past. And so when I say operating system, what do I mean? Do I mean an operating system in computing? Yes, certainly there are operating systems in computing. We also have them in nature, which direct the use of resources. We also have them in society. So of course, the social norms and mores, the compacts, the institutions, the rituals, that are used to govern how we work together or to work in a process. And so when I think about the operating system, I'm thinking more about the social operating system and how that's shifting in tandem with the technologies that are shifting in an exponential way. So let's look at the operating system of the past, which was localized. Now, to start with the story, I love the stories. This is a rock, and it's not just any rock. It's a very special rock that I've called a zebra rock. Now, when I was a kid growing up, we'd find these rocks in our backyard. They were really cool. They were striped like zebras, and they were different from all of the other rocks, so much so that we started collecting them and using them, at least between my brothers and myself, as a form of currency. So it was, it started with just these few rocks. It turned into buckets of zebra rocks, which in turn got quite extensive. We ended up inviting other kids in the neighborhood to use this currency as well. So anytime someone had a lemonade stand, we'd exchange in zebra rocks, or we even convinced the ice cream truck to accept the zebra rocks and in exchange of dollars. Again, of course, this became such a large thing that we needed now an institution. We needed a bank, and this is my brother Mike. He was the best at math out of all of us, and so we made a bank, and we got very serious. He would dress up in suits, and he was in charge of keeping the rocks in the bank or the vault, which was in his closet in his bedroom. There was one day where we sensed that something was up. There was a bit of a scandal, and we found that he had been hoarding these rocks and hiding them in a suitcase under his bed, which was impacting the supply of the rocks. If you really think about it, this story, this anecdote of our little childhood game with the rocks is not much different than how things used to be in the past. So we had trust based in a local community. So if you went to the general store, you knew the owner, you might work with a ledger or take out a loan, and you knew who the person was, so you can trust them. And then exchange in that circumstance was localized, and the communication and the trust was now based in this localized model with the people closest to you. You knew where the food was coming from, you knew the local farmer, you knew if you couldn't afford to pay for something, where that person lived, and you would trust that they would pay you back in some sort of way. But of course, we evolved. There are problems with this operating system. It was extremely limited, it was more expensive, it was inefficient, it was much, much smaller in scale, and so it limited us. And naturally, we evolved from this village, this localized operating system, to a globally connected village, to a globally connected village, which is where we are today. And it brings us to this operating system in our present, which is globalized, but it's centralized. And so communication now is digitized and global. Our supply chains are vast. We therefore trust in institutions. And so because the networks are so vast, we don't have the face-to-face communication. We need intermediaries, whether they are banks or schools or governments, to act as that proxy for trust. Now, of course, a lot's changed from the time that we were in a localized operating system of trust to now, which is a globalized system, but a lot really hasn't, because there are numerous points of failure. And we've really just taken some of the challenges from this past paradigm of localized trust and assumed that we could now move it into a present where that would work. And it's really not been the best way to design a new operating model. So we see problems here. This current operating system that we're living in now, the paradigms are centralized. And so anything from our finances to what we know, to what we buy, to what we eat, to our knowledge, is centralized. There are numerous points of failure and susceptibilities here. We've seen anything of this with any sort of information hacks or fake news, or any place that we're thinking about a centralized system. This operating system is also opaque. So again, when you get food at the local supermarket, you don't necessarily know where it's coming from. Or when you give your data to, let's say, a social network, you don't know what's happening to it. So it's opaque. That then leads to an operating system that's siloed. And so the business models that are based on, let's say, advertising or data and keeping that data to ourselves has led to siloing of companies, which then leads to a system of reaction as opposed to being more proactive. And in turn, the present operating system then is extremely regulated. And so we need rules and regulations to place order on the centralized institutions to make sure that everything is working as intended. And so keeping up with the Kardashians, let's say, keeping up with the regulations is almost as hard as keeping up with the Kardashians. And so regulatory compliance poses a lot of challenges and inefficiencies for companies. So in short, we trust these systems that we've put in place, kind of. So it's still not really working in terms of taking this model from the past and assuming it'll work in a globalized context, which brings us to now, the operating system of the future. And so it's sort of a misnomer, because really, I'd say this is the operating system of the now. We've experienced exponential shifts catalyzed by certainly global circumstances over the past year or two. And we've all been in this together, and we've ushered in this shift now to a more decentralized model of society. And so when we look at these shifts for this new operating system, we're now going from centralized and opaque and siloed and reactive and closed to something that's more decentralized, transparent, connected, autonomous, and open, almost like an organic system, the way that the environment would work. And so, what does that look like? So, let's say beyond the myths, we think that we are not already there, but let's look at a few areas of day to day life where core areas of our economy where we're seeing decentralization in everyday life. So, one, this is myth one, this is what money looks like. We still have this notion that we're going around, exchanging fiat currencies or cash dollars, when in reality, money is starting to look more like zeros and ones. It might even look like a cryptocurrency, which is also a series of zeros and ones. It might even look like a centralized currency. It might go digital and be a collectible asset or a game asset or something, even beyond that. So the concept of money or value is starting to look different from kind of the traditional concepts that we have for it. And so when we think of a decentralized new operating system for value, we're thinking of ways where we've reframed the way that we think of money and our finances from something that is kind of controlled by a central bank and something that perhaps can come out of a variety of different sources and networks with a variety of different uses. Number two, so when we think about the workplace, when we all used to go to offices and didn't spend our time here in a virtually mediated environment, again, work, if you have a comfortable couch, maybe this is what work looks like when you're working from home. And so we're thinking of now a new operating system for work where, of course, we are more distributed, we're decentralized, we're living in multiple different countries, perhaps instead of working together in one place at any one time across multiple time zones. So it's, we're seeing a decentralized operating system for work. We've shifted into that now. And so when we think about all of these areas, it's clear that every aspect of society is changing radically at this moment. And so we can sit here and talk about the specifics of decentralized finance or NFTs or the metaverse. We can think about digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, any of these, but that's really missing the point. And so here, really the focus, when I was thinking, what is the most radical shift that we're experiencing today at this moment that is so big and it's so unexpected that it's bigger than the shift from maps to apps 10 years ago, in this shift in mindset of not looking at it as a map but a series of data. And for me, this is really decentralization on the fringes. So really the future of finance, and beyond even finance, the future of life is play. And this can have a number of meanings. It's not to not take ourselves too seriously, but we're really shifting into worlds that are mediated through virtual environments and games a lot more as we go into the virtual realms. And now we're starting to see this blurring of lines in gaming, in real value. So the first is looking at the rise of day trading, and day trading almost feeling like sports. So of course we have democratized access to tooling to directly invest in stocks. So we obviously saw the rise of GameStop and everything over the past year, where younger people who had access to something they weren't able to do in the past, like retail investing through a tool like Robinhood, were then able to participate in the markets. And a lot of this were also happening through online communities on Reddit, where people were able to coordinate or discuss information that maybe would not be accessible to other standard retail investors. And so we're seeing this rise of trading really becoming part of the mass appeal, or something that people are doing day to day as a job. And so of course, in tandem with that, so we're looking at traditional financial system with stocks, we can then look at the rise of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and digital assets or cryptocurrencies. And so you're seeing something like this, which is a Bored Ape, and it of course is for all purposes a unique digital asset, a picture of this rare ape that has a certain attributes. And it's starting, again, in the digital world, let's say it has this value of $100,000. Now, why is this picture worth $100,000 to someone? Of course, it might represent, in this case, a certain level of clout, no different than a Ferrari might, or a Rolex in the actual world, but it can actually live in two places, both in the virtually mediated worlds, and also here as a accessory, to this man's suit. Where is the utility in this future of the metaverse? Is we can look at play to earn gaming first. So this is a game called Axie Infinity. They've raised now hundreds of millions of dollars by creating an environment similar to a Pokemon where you can breed and advance your characters, and the characters themselves then have value, and you can trade them as well, and you can use them within the game to further earn more money. And you see the token that supports this game, it's just completely gone up and climbed in value, because more and more people, both in the pandemic, as we have been more decentralized, more distributed, looking for ways to do more things online, but certainly a shift in the movement of new ways of generating income as other industries are becoming unnecessary or obsolete. So we're starting to see now the blurring of realities. An example here, let's look at Epic Games, which is on track to become one of the biggest media companies in the world. And here's an incredible collaboration, an ad that's in a few major metropolitan areas like New York or London, where it's essentially a massive billboard with one of their top game characters that are, using the technology of the new Unreal Engine 5. It's popping out over the masses and the crowds. But what's of interest here is that there's a Balenciaga and Fortnite collaboration for this hoodie, which is an NFT, a collectible asset in and of itself that has appeared in this advertisement, and becomes also a collectible item that lives both, is being experienced in the physical world and also is having value in the virtual world. So here we are, and now we need to think, wow, we're thinking about all these shifts in society, and you can look at how things are changing in the physical world, but really we need to be looking at the metaverse race. So enter the metaverse race. Now, how do we define the metaverse? It's a series of multi-sensory experiences, and we're already living in it. We live in it every day. We have for since we've had cloud-based and internet communication. It's just a really crappy interface. So whether it started with adventure games or cell phone or SMS, where all you saw, it was a single sensory experience. But as we're starting now to have the experience of sight and sound and emotion, we don't, in the Zoom example, we don't have a tactile experience. Perhaps we don't, but we're starting to get to multi-sensory experiences that can emulate the lived physical experience. And so when you start to think now, I look back to Second Life and we're seeing the rise of various virtual worlds. So let's say a Decentraland where you're living into this world as an avatar, but you can own pieces of property. You can build entire ecosystems in there. I spoke to a developer from Miami who's developing a whole secondary Miami and a set of music clubs in world, which will have virtual artists playing concerts that exist simultaneously in the metaverse or across multiple metaverses or in the metaverse and in real life. And so, taking it a step farther, the founder of Cirque du Soleil is working on a world called Hanai World, which is not only going to combine, kind of the traditional senses that we have in these proxy worlds, but also bringing in haptics. And so full body haptic suits, as we're seeing technology like the Tesla suit, and haptics getting better, where you're fully immersed both on the tactile sense and immersed in terms of VR and AR. Again, it's really important to think, while this is accelerating so quickly, the decentralizing technologies that underpin it are still very young, just over a decade old, and a lot of technology, the underpinnings going into cryptography for the 40 years prior. So we're moving really fast, and it's not just about the technologies now becoming available and converging, but we also need to think about sociocultural and geopolitical convergence. So experiences over the past year or two and beyond that have led to people themselves becoming more distributed and decentralized has also supported decentralization as a concept within the technologies, and certainly led to an acceleration or convergence of people spending more time in a virtually mediated environment, and the desire to make those environments better, and then in turn make the economies, the decentralized exchanges of value, flow more freely in a world that could not possibly be possible in the existing environment. Ultimately in the story, when we're thinking about the takeaways here, is that decentralization as a concept is a massive paradigm shift. It's like we're going from land to space, and any of the rules that we thought from this past, from our current context, do not apply here. And so we need to first think about that before really building any solutions or thinking of new ideas. We can't do it from the past. We've really got to put ourselves in this new world. And so, as a second point, returning to first principles instead of trying to retrofit is a huge point. I speak to a lot of folks who are thinking more still in the digital transformation mindset of how do we go from here to here in an incremental gain, as opposed to saying, let's start from the beginning and recognize that we're in a completely new context. And third, of course, adopting an abundance mindset, not one of scarcity. So it's scary to think that things that we're used to now might change, might not exist in the future. And again, that's quite scary, but it's also really exciting to think about all of the opportunities and possibilities that are have never been before possible and will be because of this. So again, thinking of opening map data, something so simple from a decade ago, leading to the creation of an entirely new economic model or marketplace model. Think about that, but on a level of now seeing all of these technologies converging and all of the socio-cultural shifts in our mindset as well, leading to something. And so again, I want to thank you for joining today. This is honestly a really unique moment in human history. A lot of incredible forces are converging to make worlds that we could never conceive of possible. And I'm grateful for joining me on this journey. So thank you.